Through the land, everybody, peace and blessings. This is Ed Onaci, also known as Brother O, and I'm very happy to be here with my brother, Akil Parker, who is the founder and the primary teacher behind all this math. Akil, welcome to BAM News. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on, man.
Very happy to have you here. Very excited to have you here because we featured an essay that you wrote for our spring 2025 issue of BAM News. And before we get into that, because we are going to talk about that, before we get into it, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are? What do you do? What is all this math so that the people can have context for why we're featuring you?
So I'm a father of three, and I'm a brother that, has had the opportunity to study a lot of African-centered scholars and read a lot of work. And, I've also been a high school math teacher and a adjunct math professor for the past 20 years, altogether. And I've just been able to combine what I've studied, in terms of African history, African American history, political science, sociology, with the mathematics that I've studied from having to prepare myself to be able to teach young people and adult learners too. And I've just recognized the need for us to become more math literate because also see math as a tool of liberation as a result of my own studies. And, I'm a brother that's out here trying to play his part by, increasing our math proficiency as a people and as a collective. Because the way I view math is really a more of a vehicle. When we really get down to it, it's a vehicle. I think about the Elijah Muhammad quote, which Malcolm often echoed, where he talks about history. Of all of our studies, history is the most equipped to reward our research. I think about mathematics in a similar context or a similar vein, where I think that mathematics is the discipline that's the most equipped to help us to develop our analytical reasoning skills
Mm,
and our critical thinking ability, which can lead to our problem solving ability, which we desperately need, whether we're talking about solving our individual problems or our collective problems. And, we think about Amos Wilson, one of the many things he said that's, very insightful was the problems of the Black community represent a multi-billion-dollar industry. So therefore, it's an incentive for our problems to be maintained, right? But once, we as more of us as Black people begin to develop problem solving ability, then we can start to, those problems get eradicated. And then at the same time, that multi-billion dollar industry gets eradicated too. So then, we have to understand that there's an incentive for us to never become problem solvers. So I see math as the best tool for us to become problem solvers, right? I'm really just a person that, has decided to, just try to really teach math to our people. Like I really want to increase the math proficiency among the Black community and within the Black community. So that's,
great.
that's who I am, in addition to being a father and, being an entrepreneur or, the most, that sums me up.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. We'll have to come back to all this math in just a little bit. But for
Mhm.
now, let's get into the essay that you contributed to the most recent issue of BAM News, which was titled A Gift to Malcolm. And one of the things that I really appreciate about that essay is how you kind of open it up by talking about a conversation that you had with one of your children, your daughter Asada. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you tell her that you're gonna give a gift to Malcolm X, and she asks, "But how do you give a gift to somebody who's already transitioned to become an ancestor?" So, can you explain that to us just a little bit? How do you give a gift to an ancestor?
So I think that one of the ways that you can give a gift to an ancestor is to, carry on their tradition, carry on their work and, you know, pick up the baton and like keep going and like spread their ideas. One of the best ways to pay homage to these ancestors is to like carry on their tradition and and talk about their work and then also like teach the children and teach the future generation. So I think a gift to Malcolm is also me even having the conversation. I think that's a definite way to pay homage or give a gift to an ancestor is by carrying on their work and,
Yeah.
incorporate it into your present day life.
Spring 2025 is when this issue came out. It's 100 years after the birth of Malcolm X, 60 years after the state assassinated him.
Mm.
And I'm curious to know, what are some specific ways that we can give that gift to this ancestor? We can continue to carry on the pay homage, carry on any traditions that he and others like him left. How do we learn from them and apply those lessons to our current situation so that we can continue their work?
With me as a math teacher, um, when I analyze his work, I see a lot of mathematical principles and concepts within his work. Like when he says in the speech that I referenced in the essay, when he says we're dealing with a cold calculating machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very true thing. Like, this white power structure, this Western imperialist structures, they're very calculated, right? Which is one of the reasons that I promote math so much, because I started to think about how many parents even and elders will say things such as, due to their own miseducation, my child doesn't need to know that much math, right? Or math is not that important. That makes me think of asymmetrical warfare, right? Because we have to realize, like, okay, somebody's getting PhDs in mathematics. Somebody's learning all this higher level mathematics that you're saying that your children don't need to learn. So if some people know it, and then those people end up getting jobs and positions with government entities or corporate entities, and then they're making decisions using all this high level math that you don't think your children need to know, you're in a sense setting your children up for failure, because those people that are in those positions are not in those positions to help our community.
Exactly.
They're in those positions to harm and control our community. So if we don't understand that, and then those people have, if we look at the different intellectual disciplines, if we view them as weapons, right? We have to think about it in that context. Like, okay, well, if I don't want my child to learn this, then okay, it's like you're sending your child into a war against, a very heavily prepared and machined nation, and your child has a knife, a pocket knife. We have to understand what we're up against and who we're up against. If we're dealing with a cold calculating machine, that means we have to learn how to calculate, right? So that we can, like, not only withstand it, but then when we do eventually win, whether it's in our physical lifetime or later, we have to be able to defend what we're able to, attain, for ourselves. So another way to, like, pay homage is to teach those lessons, to teach that mathematics, and also to explain to people that the most likely the definition of mathematics, either that we were given or that we kind of ascertained from our own public school or even private school experience, is probably a very limited definition, and probably not a full definition. Because a lot of people probably wouldn't think, well, what does Malcolm X have to do with algebra? What does Malcolm X have to do with calculus? It's like, brother, it's like, well, I know why you're saying that, because you may not really understand what mathematics really is, like on a deeper level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's think about that theme a little bit. How do you apply Malcolm X to mathematics? How do we apply Malcolm X and, again, other ancestors? Because you've been mentioning some important ones, Amos Wilson and others. How do we apply what we learned from them to our assessment of popular culture? And in particular, because you talk about this in the piece, how do we apply it to our assessment of rap music? And I would just say hip hop more generally.
So in mathematics, it trains your brain to just like instinctively to be more analytical and to seek out contradictions and to question things, right? That's an integral part of media literacy that a lot of us lack. And I'll throw myself in the sword, use myself as an example. I grew up listening to hip hop. I still listen to hip hop, right?
Same.
It just so happens that now I'm a 45-year-old man. I have a lot more discernment than I had when I was 15. So when I was 15, I think about this often. I'm like, man, like when I was 15, if one of my favorite rappers said something, I never even questioned whether it made sense or not. And now looking back on it, well, since I've been in my adult years and when I began to start looking back on like the stuff I used to listen to, I'm like, bro, that makes absolutely no sense. Like, why did we just bob our heads and like recite that and go along
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah.
So with like, with using the mathematical, processes and just thinking about things more mathematically and being more conscious of it, we start to question things. And we start to wonder about things. And we start to wonder about, well, why is it that the local radio station is having a stop the violence block party for the youth and everything, but then they bring out the rapper that's rapping about violence, that raps about
Exactly.
violence, and then it's not even like, well, they tell them like, well, bro, don't sing that song and that song and that song. No, go ahead, sing your popular song because your
Yeah.
popular song is really about killing black people.
Yep.
And that makes me think, of like, the ancestor, Dr. Bobby Wright, which said, the one contradiction in the black community is that there are no contradictions. Like you can kind of do anything and get away with it,
Mm.
So it's like it's wild, but at the same time, I think part of the reason that a lot of people don't recognize that contradiction is because of a lack of training, a lack of critical thinking ability. And then it takes us back to mathematics. The mathematics is going to inherently train your brain to be on the lookout for that. So as long as you're not on the lookout for that, somebody can come and propagandize you and sell you anything, and you won't even question it. So one of the elements of hystematics, which is the teaching framework I use using Black history as an entry point for mathematics, and mathematics as an entry point for Black history.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the elements is conceptual double entendres,
Okay.
right? Double entendres, in connection with hip hop, double entendres and all that. Radical equations was one of the early ones that I thought of, right?
Yeah.
Because when you solve a radical equation, and I'm thinking like the word radical, okay, Black radical tradition, radical Black activists, radical equations. When you sit down, doing some work with some radical equations, you might have like 3 plus the square root of 2x minus 5 equals 16. Solve for x. The first step is to isolate the radical, meaning on one side of the equation. So I got to get rid of that 3 because that's what I say, 3 plus whatever I said, but there was some number plus the radical expression. First step is to isolate the radical. Second step, eliminate the radical sign by using an inverse operation. One day I'm doing one of these problems and I'm like, bro, this is exactly what they do to our radical leaders. The first step is isolation, the attempt by the media. Let's isolate them from the Black community, right? Yep. Put out information, let's expose, something they're doing. Maybe they have some questionable behavior, or maybe they don't. Let's make up questionable behavior because people are going to believe us anyway, right? Yeah. So let's attempt to isolate them from the community. Then once you do that, let's eliminate them. So we're going to eliminate them either by incarceration for the rest of their life, or we just murder them outright, right? Just physically murder them outright. And it's like that. So again, the parallels in the mathematics and the algebra, like this is how we solve the equations, and this is what these government entities and corporate entities have been doing. This is the essence of COINTELPRO, right? And it's in the algebra. So currently I teach a hystematics course on the narrative platform, narrative with a K. The narrative platform is an outgrowth of these conversations that the journalist Karen Hunter started having with Dr. Greg Carr, who used to be the chair of the African American Studies Department at Howard. He still teaches in the department, but these conversations they started having during the pandemic about 5 years ago. So there's an online platform. So the class is on Thursday mornings, right? The class that I teach is on Thursday mornings. And what the way I teach it is, I'll give you an example. Like as this morning's class, I taught my class. We were going over, some arithmetic concepts, right? Because even the basics are very important as well. So we were talking about multiplication methods, 2 of them, the lattice method and the area model method of multiplication, right? But because it's timely, it's July 3rd. So around this time of year, I always try to read or reference Douglas's July 4th speech. What is the meaning of July the 4th to a slave, right? So I took that. So when in the hystematics framework, part of that is, combining the Black history with the math. So we're talking about Douglas, and I'm also creating multiplication problems that either include numbers that are significant to Douglas's life, such as, 1818, the year he was born,
Hmm.
1895, the year he made transition, even 1843. When we have, what was it, the People's Convention, the National Convention of Colored Citizens,
Yeah,
where
color
he has the
media.
difference with Henry Highland Garnett.
Yep.
And even me personally, I respect Douglas, but I'm more on the side of Henry Highland Garnett. It's like,
And
no,
real quick, why are you more on the side of Henry Highland Garnett? This is very important.
because Garnett's position was, his speech was called, titled "The Call to Rebellion," and
Yes.
he's saying that black people, enslaved black people, and black people should rise up against their masters and against their owners, and we should free ourselves from slavery. Right? That's how we should do that.
So we have all this math on YouTube. Are there any other social media
Mm-hmm.
handles that we should know of?
Allthismath.com. Also, Instagram, TikTok, all this math. I'm pretty active on there. Facebook, all this math. But yeah, definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. I also have a book for parents. It's a resource guide. Well, you'll see the hystematics framework in the book as well. It's called How to Use All This Math, Volume 1. And what I'm doing is I'm just showing parents how, not necessarily parent, but any elders, community members, that have a concern for children and their well-being and want to help prepare them for math class, right?
Yeah.
So they'll have some prerequisite skills so they don't just go into math class cold and like lost. I show you how to take everyday activities like, in the kitchen, running errands, riding in the car, walking down the street, and leverage those and create teachable moments in algebra, arithmetic, and geometry. So that's how to use all this math. Volume 1, Volume 2 is in the works as well,
Fantastic.
and
Good.
that's
Good.
available on Amazon.
Good. Well, Akil Parker, all this math, thanks so much for joining us and look forward to learning more from you moving forward.
Definitely, bro. Definitely. I appreciate you having me.